Happy Halloween, everybody! I have a very large knife/sword, and I'm just gonna set this down. This is actually part of Ichigo's new Zangetsu, so very dangerous, very sharp. Actually, you know what? If Jason Voorhees was going to have a Bankai, what would it be? Truly terrifying, that's what it would be. It would just be like a giant machete, like the size of the moon, that just hovers above him, and he would just bring it down, and it would just wipe out all life on the planet. That's basically what it would be. Anyway, yeah, happy Halloween. We got the Halloween special lights up over here. Barry has a pumpkin friend. That's cool. I wasn't going to keep the red spotlight on me the entire time, but you know what? I kind of like the ambiance, so let's just roll with it. This will be One Piece, Chapter 1030 review, titled The Echoes of the Impermanence of All Things. Very rich, very poetic, which makes sense because this is the opening line of a poem. Not here to talk about that, though. We're here to talk about the cover page that Oda drew, which is Brook hanging out with a bunch of army ants, which, you know, this is this channel, so we have ant facts. What the hell? Play the intro for old time's sake.
Ant facts. Facts about ants and other insects, but mostly ants.
Yeah, so army ants are pretty vicious. I've done plenty of episodes on army ants for ant facts, and yeah, they're even more terrifying here, though, in the One Piece world, because they're literally like army ants. Like, they have helmets and armor, and they're carrying like spears, like hut, 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 and they're just like walking through the forest floor, and Brook sees that, and he just like backs off. Actually reminds me of the time in Strong World where Brook fought against the ants there, and he like sliced them all up because they ignored him, because the ants went after living flesh and they ignored Brook, and he's like, how rude, and he like sliced them all up because they wouldn't attack him. So yeah, that's Brook. Here he's much more friendly with the ants. He's just like walking through the forest, and here comes some army ants marching down the way, and he's like, ah, yes, I'll just step aside here. There you go. You know, so that's that. Okay, so I hear this is a pretty weird chapter. A lot of stuff going on, so let's just dive right into it. We start off in the Iwato room, or the cavern chamber of Kaido's fortress. This is a room we really haven't seen yet, but from what it seems like it's like the private like sleeping quarters, or the private you know, banquet quarters for the numbers. It's just this giant cavernous room that's off to the side of Onigashima. So Apu is there with Drake, and at first we think it's just them. And Apu has survived. You know, he was running through the festival hall. I kind of lost track of him for a while because I know he had the antibody for the Ice Oni virus that Queen kind of just tossed to him, and he's just like, if you survive, great. If you don't, well... And so Apu was like running through the hall trying to get away from everybody. Zoro slashed him. I remember that. Was that the last time we saw Apu? It might have been. Okay, but anyway, he's still alive, of course. He's one of the supernovas. I didn't think that Oda would just write him out of the story that quickly. And we haven't seen Drake in a while either, and so I guess what happened at some point was maybe Apu ran away and Drake chased after him, and they both ended up in this hall, in this like cavernous room off to the side of Onigashima. And Apu is basically kind of trying to make a deal with Drake, sort of. He's just like, all right, listen here. From what I can gather, you're probably a Marine spy, right? I mean, like, you have that sort of secret agent James Bond vibe about you. You don't have to go into greater detail than that, but you're probably a Marine spy. Well, after Queen kind of screwed me over, I'm not really, you know, I don't really want to be part of the Beast Pirates anymore, so how about we just team up and we form an alliance, right? Okay? And so Apu's perspective on this isn't even really so much of an alliance, it's just like, hey, look, after this battle is over, it doesn't even matter who the winner's going to be, whether it's Kaido or Big Mom or the Straw Hats or the Rebellion, whoever wins, you know, the winners are going to be exhausted. They're going to be beaten to hell because of the battle. So how about we just kind of like take advantage of that? Like, we can just hang out in here until the battle's over, and then after it's concluded, you know, you're a Marine spy, you can take down Kaido or whatever, and we can just, basically it's like mutually beneficial for both of us. Now Drake has the rebuttal of that, or like you an idiot. You are a traitor. You betrayed Kid and Hawkins and everybody, thinking that you were part of an alliance with them, and then you just like pulled the rug out from underneath them, and you were actually secretly working for Kaido the whole time. Like, why would I trust you? And Apu is just like, oh, you don't understand though. Like, you know, even if you don't trust us, trust has nothing to do with this. It's just basically like, we hang out in here until the time is right, and then we attack. That's all there is to it. You can go after your target, I'll go after my target. Basically, I think Apu at this point point is just trying to figure out a way to get out of Wano and Onigashima without being killed. So he's just like, you know what? I'm just going to hang out in here, and then I'll make my move when the time is right. You can make your move. I'm not going to get in your way. You don't get in my way. And then maybe at the end of the day, we can all get out of, Wano alive. I guess that's basically the perspective there. Now, we kind of zoom back a little bit, and they're not the only ones in this cavernous room. We also have the top 3 members of the numbers. I am so happy. I don't think that Oda would have forgotten about these guys, but I guess I'm happy that the top 3 numbers actually look different and more intimidating and a lot stronger than the other numbers we've seen up until now. I just did a video about this last week talking about the top 3 numbers and if they're actually going to be important to the story, or if we're going to have just a bunch of the lumbering kind of giants that we've seen up until now. Because up until now, the numbers, let's just be honest, they haven't been very impressive. If nothing else, they were basically just a measuring stick to see how strong the Straw Hats have gotten. Frankie took out one of them, Yamato took out one of them, the Minks took out Nangi, Brook took out Kuyu, number 9, by himself. Luffy took out one, Drake took out one. These are Oars-sized opponents, and Oda just wanted to showcase just how strong the Straw Hats have gotten since the time skip, since they fought against Oars back at Thriller Bark, right? So we see the top 3 numbers. Now, Oda does not directly give them cards underneath them, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, but I have a good idea on who is who, alright? So who is who? Who's who is off doing something else right now, being beaten down and bleeding out on the ground with a caved-in skull. But now these numbers right here, okay? So the first number we see, I'm going from left to right here, okay? So we see a big dude with a very large, kind of cheeks. His cheeks are giant. He's got a goatee. He's got kind of his cheeks are kind of flushed red because they've all been drinking because they're still the numbers. And he has 2 horns kind of sticking out like antennas, like a TV antenna out of his head. And he has sort of like a really misshapen kind of face that's sort of oval shaped. And he's off to the side on the left. Then in the center, we see the shortest one of them, although he might just be sitting down too. And he's just chomping down on this giant piece of meat, this piece of mutton, Sea King meat or whatever, a Sea King drumstick. Do Sea Kings have drumsticks? I don't know. Anyway, he's just eating that, and he actually looks remarkably like Ashura Doji. He has he's just a very big, meaty guy, and he also has the curly hair, kind of reminiscent of Ashura Doji. And then he has 2 horns that are similar to Kaido's horns that kind of curve, and they go straight up. And then off to the right is the most sinister out of all of them. Compared to the other numbers, this guy looks more like a giant. He's not misshapen or anything. He just looks like a really big dude with curved devil horns coming out of his forehead. He's got a snidely whiplash mustache, from Wacky Races, right? And he just he looks like a straight up devil. He just looks like a straight up devil. His face isn't misshapen or anything. He doesn't have any weird proportions. He just looks like an ancient giant, what an ancient giant might have looked like originally, okay? And he's just kind of sneering. They're all sort of just in the room just listening to Apu trying to make this deal with Drake. They're not really moving. They're not really doing anything. They're just kind of smirking. That's all they're doing. Now, on the bottom of the page, Oda does give their names, but he doesn't specify what their numbers are, okay? But remember, we can actually figure this out if you know a little bit about Japanese and also their laughter style, because we hear about their laughs as they're in the room eating and whatever, just kind of looking at Apu and Drake. So their names are Zanki, Fuga, and Inbi. Zanki is the one with the oval-shaped head on the left. Fuga is the one in the center eating the mutton, and Inbi is the devil-looking dude. And you can tell that because of their laughter style, because Zanki's laughter style is Zaki ki ki ki, and then Fuga's is Fuga ga ga ga, and then it's Inbi Inbi Inbi, right, okay? Now, when it comes to this, what I think it is Zanki is number 3, Fuga is number 2, and Inbi is number 1, okay? Because Zanki is sort of like San, and you can also write it with a Z depending on the diacritics in Japanese, so it's like San or Zan, so number 3. And then Fuga is number 2, and I remember that from, remember that Magic Pocket Biscuit song I had to sing that one time? Watch the Cracker video, the video on Charlotte Cracker. There's a Japanese song involving a magic pocket, and that's kind of why Cracker does his clapping in order to summon the biscuit soldiers, right? It's Pocket to no nakane wa biscuit toga hitotsu. Hitotsu is in number 1, and then it's Pocket toga tatakuto biscuit toga futatsu. Futatsu being a second biscuit. So fu 2 seconds, so I'm guessing Fuga is number 2, and then Ebi, and the only one I got there is like Ichi is that, and his name does start with like, it kind of sounds like that, like Ichi, Ebi, so I'm just gonna go with that. Also, he looks like the most intimidating one, and he looks like the one, like, he doesn't look drunk, he doesn't look goofy, he's not just like off to the side like, No, he looks like a straight up like, I am the strongest number, I'm a demon devil, I know hockey, I might have a devil fruit, and I'm just here like, making a deal with the devil, are you, Drake? So, yeah, watch that guy, alright? That's all I'm saying there. Anyway, we don't really get to see Drake's response to this. He doesn't really trust Apu, but we don't know what direction he's going to take there. And then the numbers just kind of look on, and Apu is kind of speaking over as they're, like, sneering at them, like, you know, opportunities like this don't come very often, Drake. You know, you must weigh your options very carefully from here on out. So, I don't know, it kind of also sounds like a veiled threat, sort of like, you know, like, well, you don't have to listen to me, but if you choose to go against me or choose to fight me, I don't know, these 3 giants amongst giants behind me might attack you as well. So it's sort of like a veiled threat, but I don't think any of these, like, numbers would also, like, just, like, listen to Apu. I mean, he does have the ability of the fighting music with his Otonomi that can kind of revive the numbers, and he was sort of controlling them. So that's another perspective. Maybe he does have just complete control over the numbers, and that's how Apu is going to get back in this fight, using the numbers as sort of like his zombies, like puppets or whatever, you know, to attack. But these are like the strongest ones. Like that might have worked on like Hacha, who got distracted by like the shiny that it was the Frankie Shogun. He's like, ooh, a shiny, and he ran away. These guys look different. I don't know if that was going to work on them, if he could like manipulate them using his music. Maybe he could though. Alright, so we cut away from that, and we see a bunch of other different scenes around Onigashima. We see a scene in the first hall where Komachio is being saved by Hamlet. Hamlet was the headliner, the gifter that has the giraffe smile, and he was swayed by Tama. He was the dude that literally has a giraffe body, except his head, the head where the giraffe should be, is literally his body, and it's just like bobbing up and down because he's like giraffe neck behind him, right? So they rescue Komachio, they save the doggy, that's good. Usopp and Nami are there kind of helping, and then they turn around and they look down the stairs and they see a bunch of people being chased away by a torso-less yokai. So it's literally just a pair of legs just running through the hall, and everybody's running away from it. Now, of course, when Usopp and Nami hear about like disembodied legs running around, that immediately, you know, like, oh, that rings a bell. Didn't we encounter something like that before? And so, sure enough, they look down and it's actually Kinemon's legs that are running through the hall. And except last time it wasn't like that violent or gory. No, it's very gory because blood is literally splurting out of the top of the legs, as you would imagine for disembodied legs to exhibit. That's actually really funny because that brings up like a point when Oda was originally talking about like devil fruit powers in One Piece. Like, I think somebody brought up a question like, hey, like this is way back at the beginning of the story. We're talking like Orange Town arc, like when Buggy was introduced. People were asking how devil fruits worked because we didn't really understand it yet. It's like, hey, when Buggy separates his body with the Barabara-no-Mi, shouldn't we see his muscles and bones and guts and everything? And Oda was like, oh no, I can't do that. If I drew that, like the story would be unnecessarily gory. Like it would be a seinen if I drew it like that. Same reason why whenever devil fruit users transform or something, their clothes kind of transform too. Otherwise, there would be nudity all over this story. And so it's funny though because this kind of resembles that. Like, you know, if Oda was a little bit more accurate, like, oh, okay, yeah, here's Kinemon's legs running around with blood splurting out of the top. So that's about accurate, right? So, remember, Kinemon has a very unique skill that many people might have actually forgotten about. He can actually communicate through his farts. You know what? Honestly, it's not the greatest superpower in the world, but if somebody offered it to me, I wouldn't say no. But anyway, yeah, he could like... hey everybody, how you doing? I don't know where I am. Oh god, help me please. I'm Kinemon. It's like you're from like Rock Bottom from like SpongeBob or whatever. So Usopp grapples the legs and he's like, Kinemon, calm down. It's me, Usopp. But of course, he's just legs. He's just legs. He's got no ears. He can't hear anything. So Nami's like, okay, hold on, let me try something. Nami just kind of like, I guess, takes some blood or something and just traces the sign of the Kozuki moon, the crescent moon, the crest onto the leg. And so the leg kind of feels the crest and calms down. And it's like, oh, thank God, there's another member of the rebellion here. That's great. I am Kinemon. You must help Okiku. She is severely injured. She might die. Follow me. So here's the situation on that. Many people are like, all right, how does this even work? They kind of attach the legs to Hamlet, and Usopp kind of jumps on his back, and he's like, I'm taking Hamlet. Let's ride. And so they go to try to rescue Okiku. So that's good. Okiku won't die. That's great. But anyway, this is the explanation on how this worked, okay? So the last time we saw Kinemon, Kaido kind of burst into the attic and just kind of like attacked him, right? And so it was looking like not very good. And basically Kaido hit him so damn hard, he basically got cut in half. However, remember, Law had previously used the Op-Op fruit on Kinemon at Punk Hazard to separate his body into thirds, his head, his torso, and his legs. That's actually how we first got introduced to Kinemon back at Punk Hazard, okay? So Kinemon's on the ground and he's conscious. He can't move because he doesn't have any legs, but he's on the ground and he's just like, man, how did I survive that? Oh, I know. Maybe I wasn't reattached properly because of Law's ability, so maybe I separated. So this actually kind of does make sense given Law's ability and all the weird things you can do with it. I wouldn't say this is like Oda just pulled this out of nowhere, okay? So with Law's Op-Op fruit, when he uses shambles and he like separates you, okay, he can reattach you in any type of way that he wants, right? So for example, Law could slice me in half, with my lower half, my legs, and my upper half. And I could be reattached with my legs facing forward, but my front facing the opposite direction, and I could still move around. Like, my legs would be facing an opposite direction. It would be very awkward to move, but I wouldn't feel any pain. I wouldn't be seeping blood or anything. My spinal cord would still work. It's just that I would be like, whoa, like I wouldn't be able to like move around properly, right? Like everything would be backwards, okay? And remember also, it was not Law that reattached Kinemon. I think that was actually Sanji that did that. Sanji was the one, Sanji reassembled his head at Punk Hazard, and I think they finally reassembled Kinemon when he was outside after they saved the torso. I think it was Sanji or Zoro. Anyway, Law was not present. Law did not take all of Kinemon's pieces and was just like shambles and then like reassembled him perfectly, okay? It was just the Straw Hats that picked up his pieces and just stacked them on top of each other, which the way Law's fruit worked, that was good enough. However, I don't think they were exact. So, like, let me put it this way. Here's an orange. Just roll with me on this. Here's an orange, okay? Now, let's say you split that orange right in half, okay? And I'm going to mark it with this little line there, okay? If you reattach the orange, maybe even just slightly off-center, I'm talking even like a centimeter off-center, it'll still stick, but it's not going to be a perfect match, so it's not going to be permanently stuck like you used to be. So that might have been what happened with Kinemon. They pasted him back together, but he was just a little bit like, he was just a little bit off-center, like his belly button wouldn't have lined up right, okay? And so because he was not reattached perfectly, when Kaido hit him, it sort of undone the attack, and so he still got injured. He's still bleeding out pretty bad, but, he was able to kind of, like, avoid the worst of it. Now, if he was reattached perfectly and everything lined up exactly the way that he got separated, then, the attack might have just straight up killed him. All right, so I can kind of understand that because it was not Law that reattached him. It was just the Straw Hats, stacking him on top of each other, okay? So that kind of makes sense there. So, meanwhile, while this is going on, remember, this area where they're in right now, it's just Kinemon, Kanjuro, Kiku, and they're all on the ground, they're all bleeding out, they're all very, very close to death's door. The fire is still raging around them, it's spreading throughout the entire hall, so that's pretty dangerous. And Kinemon begins to hear Orochi's voice. So Orochi is on one, I am the Orochi, I can never die! He's on one of those, smaller pond snail, transponder snail things, and he's talking to Kanjuro, and Kinemon's like, wait a second, wasn't Orochi beheaded? Wait a second, isn't Kanjuro dead? Who's he talking to? And so we cut over to Kanjuro, who is on the ground as well, and Kinemon sliced him down last time we saw him. He's on the ground, he is still barely alive, he's holding on by a thread, and he just has like the transponder snail in his coat, and he's just listening to Orochi, and he's just like, Kanjuro, are you still alive? He's like, the curtain is falling on my performance. Any moment now, I will go and join our clan. And he's just like, I see. Well, unfortunately, it's very vexing, but the rebellion, they call out for more retribution. They need revenge, Kanjuro. Our clan must be avenged no matter what. Use your last breath to make an epic encore. Grab your brush, Kanjuro. Grab your brush and use your mighty painting powers to paint the anguish and turmoil of the Kozuki clan. If my name isn't Kurozumi Orochi. You know, so that's what Orochi does. That's what he does there. So Kanjuro, with his mighty paintbrush, oh my god, do I not have a paintbrush? Why don't I have a giant paintbrush? I should have one of those. You know what? Okay, fine. It's okay. I'll use Mogura. All right, he takes his mighty giant Mogura paintbrush, and he's still on the ground, and he's just like, right, must paint like my life depended on it. This is for the Kurozumi clan. And he just like plops his paintbrush down, and he doesn't paint anything like, you know, substantial. He just like, you know, embodies all of his hatred and rage into this creation, and it basically just turns into a giant blob. Not very unlike the blob that we saw in Orochi's backstory when he gave Kanjuro the brush fruit. Remember that? Where we don't actually see Kanjuro as a little kid. We only see him as just this blobby thing, like this black viscous goo. And it's supposed to represent that Kanjuro is an actor, so he only takes on the roles of like others. Like being himself is something Kanjuro can't really do. It's just like he's always even him being a traitor might not be who he really is. It's just the role that Orochi gave him. Like he doesn't have an original form. He doesn't have who he used to be, or he's forgotten it, or he's cast it aside. It's just whatever role people tell him to do. So Orochi tells him to fulfill the role of the Kurozumis, and he does, and then he had to fulfill the role of Kanjuro to be the Scabbards, you know, like that's just who he is, right? So he paints this blob on the ground, which animates into this giant blob that's also like a ghost, kind of. It's like a fire elemental, but it's also ethereal, so it can like pass through walls, and any living thing that touches it just gets erupted in flames, okay? So that's pretty OP. I was wondering why he couldn't do that. It honestly sounds a lot more like Nen at this point, like post-mortem Nen, where Kanjuro like devotes his last bit of effort and anger and revenge into his creation, and then he dies, and like the post-mortem Nen creates this horrible abomination that like stalks the halls of Onigashima. Honestly, that's kind of what it sounds like, although devil fruit powers don't work like this. So because the blob still exists and is like phasing through walls, I'm imagining Kanjuro, even after he's done painting it, he sort of collapses again, but I'm guessing he's still alive because the blob is still alive. So, you know, if we already didn't have enough shit to worry about, let's see here. Let's go down the list. Giant dragon duck god rampaging on the roof. Pteranodon fighting against Zoro. Brachiosaur, dinosaur, cyborg, megazord, detachable missile launcher fighting against Sanji. Sanji himself having an existential crisis. The numbers plotting with Apu. The world government approaching the entire island. Big Mom's crew still lurking somewhere. Orochi still being alive, although I don't know how much of a threat you really consider that. Oh yeah, the entire island about to be dropped on the flower capital with a bunch of explosives inside of it that are gonna go kaboom boom. You know, we didn't have enough stuff to worry about. Now we have a giant ethereal ghost fire elemental lurking around the hallways, torching everything it sees. So we actually cut over to Orochi to see where he's at right now. Orochi is in some kind of like security bunker. He's in like some kind of warehouse, and he's completely like surrounded by like treasures and scrolls and things. And he just looks like he doesn't have a care in the world. He's just sitting there laying back, you know, picking his nose, and he's just like, ha ha ha, I am Lord Orochi. Oh, those silly pirates. I don't care who wins at this point. Kaido, I know that you have a massive stockpile of weapons on Onigashima. Kanjuro's creation will light it ablaze, and the entire island will go up in flames. Hurry back, Fuku Rokuju. We must escape this place. So, you know, at this point, I'm starting to think, like, wait a second. What if, I think we might have been going about this all wrong. We used to assume that the Yamato no Orochi fruit is like it turns him into a Hydra, so he has to be killed like 8 times. What if the Yamato Orochi fruit allows him to just separate his body into 8 different parts? Like, he can literally turn into an 8-headed serpent, but then he can, like, separate himself into 8 different Orochis, alright? But then again, the Orochi that fought against the Scabbards turned into the 8-headed serpent. Maybe each of the parts could turn into the 8-headed serpent. I don't know, but maybe it would make more sense if he could, like, send out clones or different versions of himself, and those are the ones that have been getting cut in half. That also makes sense, like, if he had that ability, he would do that. Like, he has body doubles, and he can use those whenever he wants, which would make a lot of sense, because given the fact, you know, we have ninjas, so body duplication jutsu, but also he's so nervous all the time, it would make sense that he would always send proxies to banquets in case he got assassinated, because Orochi seems like the kind of guy that would always be concerned about getting assassinated from somewhere, right? So maybe, I don't know. Anyway, Fuku Rokuju is still clearly working with him, because he's like, hey, Fuku Rokuju, get back here and then we can escape, right? So Orochi's in his bunker. He seems like he doesn't really care about anything right now, but I'm thinking that's probably going to collapse at some point. Like, literally, the room might just collapse at some point. So, yeah. We now cut over to Yamato in her full Makami form, the wolf form, and she is running through Onigashima. People are just kind of like getting out of the way with this giant wolf running through the hallways, and she's like, okay, I've made it back into the festival hall. Now I have to get to the lowest level. We actually see a side view map of Onigashima, and I love that Oda finally showed this, because this is the first time we see the side view. So we see like the front of the skull, kind of like, actually, hold on. I actually have one right here. Okay, because it's Halloween, because it's spooky. So imagine this is the Muffin Mountain. This is the Oni skull, all right? So the front of it, you know, you got like the stairs. Here's like the front yard of Onigashima where that giant sword is, and then the stairs kind of go up into the mouth of the skull, right? And so we kind of get a side view. So everything from like this part of the skull is the live stage, the Golden Kagura Festival Hall, where like the big battles are going on right now, like where Queen and Sanji were fighting and everything. That's like the front half. And then the back half of this skull, where like the brain would be, this is where that giant pagoda tower is. And it's like, you know, level 1, level 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the roof where Kaido and Luffy are fighting right now. And then there's two basements that we see that Law was exploring where the poneglyphs are. And then we see like an even bigger like sub-basement under that basement that has like, you know, 2 whole layers of just like armaments and guns and cannons and dynamite and gunpowder, and that's where Yamato is going. So Yamato has just reached like this point, like inside of the mouth of the skull, and so she still has to get like all the way down here into the bedrock of the island itself. So it's not going to be easy, and she's like, I don't know if I'm going to make it in time, so, you know, Momonosuke-kun, just try as best as you can to slow the island's descent any bit, like any amount of time helps. We actually do see Momonosuke here, and he's actually doing a strategy that I didn't even consider, but actually makes a lot of sense. I was going on about, like, maybe Momo could manipulate Kaido's flaming clouds or something, or, you know, like something happens and he learns to make a giant cloud all of a sudden. No, Momonosuke is like, I can only make tiny clouds! Wait a second. What if I just... As long as it's not the pictures, I don't care. Okay. So Momonosuke, he's like, why don't I just make a bunch of tiny clouds and they just, you know, form into a bigger cloud? And they're kind of strapped for time right now, and Momonosuke is sort of panicking, and this is the best idea he has, but you know what? It's an idea. So he's just like, okay, poof, 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 and he just like starts firing off the little clouds, and they don't go away, they actually cohere into a larger cloud. And so he's just like, okay, this is gonna take a while, but if I can just keep this pace up, I should be okay. So I don't know if he's gonna make a cloud big enough to cover the entire island, but it might be able to slow it down a little bit. That's the strategy we're going with right now. That's actually a big brain, Momonosuke. If anybody else suggested that idea, good on you, because that didn't even cross my mind. I was coming up with all these other really complicated ideas, but she's like, no, he can make small ones, so just make a bunch of small ones and make a big one. It's like, you know, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. Eventually you'll get to a million. Anyway, so yeah, we see the blob moving around Onigashima. We see the fire festival below. Everybody's still happy and having a fun time. Seem to have not noticed the giant flaming skull approaching over their heads yet, so they have a little bit more time of having fun at the festival. The castle's being choked by flames. We see Brook and Robin running through the hall. Now, the fire is actually becoming a bit of an issue. It was just like a backdrop for a while, but no, it is a serious concern right now. Like, Brook is even like, we don't even have time to fight the, you know, the gifters or the Kaido's crew or whatever. We just have to get out of here. There's not even any time to fight anymore. We need to escape the fire. We see CP0, and they're no longer in the indestructible reception reception room. They've left their waiting room, and so now they're just wandering somewhere. We don't know where they are, but we see flames around them, so they're just walking through the hallways in flames. They seem pretty chill. They don't seem like they're like in a hurry or something, so they're definitely heading somewhere. We see scenes of Marco, Izo, Kawamatsu. They're all fighting. We see scenes of Queen and Sanji clashing, so they've resumed their fight. I guess Sanji has kind of gotten over his concerns, and he's now clashing with Queen again. We see Luffy and Kaido very briefly. Kaido just looks like he just fired a blast from his mouth, and Luffy just has his arm up with armament hockey, although he doesn't look like he's in Gear 4th, because Gear 4th has like the markings on his face. He doesn't have those. He just has his like arm held out like he's using Gear 4th, but it's just in like armament mode, and his face looks the same. So I don't know, maybe he figured out a way to just use Gear 4th into like one of his arms or something. Then we see Zoro clashing with King, you know, and we don't really get to see any more of his mask, you know, so his mask is still just shattered just a little bit there. These are just brief scenes all over the battle, and, you know, they're also narrated by Orochi as he's doing it, like, the Kozuki forces and the Emperors, they are all fall, and I will be the one, you know, like, so just typical Orochi crap. So now we cut over to see Yamato as she's running through the hall. A giant explosion occurs above her, and it's Ikoku's sovereignty. It's Big Mom's, you know, Spear of Elbaf kind of attack. And so it blasts out part of the wall, and we see Kid's Punk Rotten, the giant mechanical, like, robot with the skull face. It gets blasted out of the side. Kid is falling down, and then Big Mom jumps out with Napoleon, like, Mama! And so basically it's like, you know, Kid and her were fighting, and then she's like Ikoku's sovereignty, blasts him out of the wall, he's fallen to the ground, she jumps after him, about to just impale him with her sword, okay? And so at this point, Kid kind of remembers a conversation he just had with Law. I'm assuming they had this conversation right at the end of last chapter, right after Killer defeated Hawkins and the curse was lifted from Kid. He kind of just got back up and he's like, I got my second wind, right? And so he looked over at Law and he's like, hey, Trafalgar, have you awakened to your power yet? Ooh. And then Law is like, yeah, I have. Ooh. Careful. They're not actually doing the woo, but like I am. Okay, so Kid and Law have both awakened their devil fruit powers. Yes. Okay. Questions about this? This is gonna be a video, but no, like, okay, let's just continue before I get too excited. Okay, so Law's like, yeah, I've done it, you know, Kid, I've awakened my power, except it's like a last-ditch, last resort kind of thing, because it drains a shit ton of stamina. And it's one of those things like, if I use it and it doesn't work, if it doesn't take down the enemy, I'm done. I can't fight anymore. And Kid is like, yeah, it's the same thing with me. However, there's no way, I mean, this is Big Mom we're talking about. There's no way we can fight and beat her without using our strongest last-ditch effort attacks. Like, it's just not going to happen. So how about we do this? We just both use our final attacks together and just hope it's enough to take her down. That's basically Kid's idea. And Law's like he can't, I mean, he's like afraid, but at the same time he's like, I don't know, man, that's a lot of a risk, but yeah, you're right. I mean, there's nothing else we can really do to fight against her. Like, what else are we gonna do here? And so Kid's like, all right, let's do it. And so we get to see Kid and Law's Devil Fruit awakening. This raises so many questions, like, once again, how do you awaken a fruit exactly? Remember, Kid and Law have had their fruits for a while. Law's had his fruit for about 13 years. Kid has had his, I don't know for how long, but maybe ever since he was a kid as well, since Kid was a kid. Maybe he had his magnet fruit, the Jiki Jiki no Mi. And Luffy's also had his fruit for a while. He's had his fruit since he was 7. He's 19 now, so 12 years. So if Law's had his for 13 and Luffy's had his for 12, I think Luffy would be capable of awakening anything. Since Law and Kid are able to do it, I think Luffy would be able to awaken it as well if Luffy has not done it already and he just didn't know. I don't know. Or maybe there's something special you have to learn. See, here's the thing. Law awakening his fruit, to me, makes perfect sense. He's a very smart fighter, and so it would make sense that he's a doctor, so he would be able to bring out the true power of the Op fruit, and he discovered the awakening. If it was anything like complicated, I think Law could do it. Now, Kid, on the other hand, though, Kid's not an idiot or anything, but, you know, it's just like, okay, if Kid can awaken it, Luffy can too. There really should be no difference there, okay? I mean, it might depend on how long you've had the fruit with you, but if Kid and Law are awakening it, like, Luffy's probably going to awaken his fruit, maybe even in this fight. All right, I was kind of thinking that, you know, Luffy's Gear 5th would be his awakening, which it still might be, but that wasn't going to be in this battle. That wasn't going to be toward later. But hey, if Oda is already going with this, if he's already throwing the awakening powers at us for Law and Kid, and it's like, okay, if we're doing this, fine, Luffy's probably going to awaken his fruit, and he might just use Gear 5th to defeat Kaido. That seems to be on the table for me right now. Let me know what you think about that. But anyway, so they both agree to use their high-octane attacks. So as Big Mom is on top of Prometheus about to stab Kid, as they're kind of all in the middle of the air, keep in mind here. Law kind of walks up from the giant hole she just made, and he uses his awakening of power, K-Room, or Kroom. I'm not really sure how you pronounce it. I'm assuming it's K-Room, okay? So it's just room with a K in front of it, and it makes a tiny little bubble. So room is usually like, and it makes like a giant bubble to cover the battlefield. This is just like a tiny little bubble, like that just kind of fits in the palm of his hand, okay? And so then he takes his sword, which I kind of maybe have over here, but I'm not really sure. You know what? For right now, let's just use Shusui. Shusui will be playing the role of Kikoku for this episode. So he takes out his sword, and he uses K-Room in one hand, and then he just kind of like puts the sword's blade through the bubble, which sort of creates like, it really is like a bubble, like a soap bubble, so it's just like covering the blade of Kikoku in like this sheen and like this resin, and then he goes and lands on Big Mom's back and runs her through with the sword. The sword goes in her back, out her neck. However, it doesn't physically hurt her on the outside. Instead, Law uses a technique called anesthesia, and he even says, like, the attack does no physical damage on the outside. It damages your insides instead. And so he uses an attack called... Alright, this is funny. So, it's German again, because a lot of Law's attacks are German, and so... it's like shockwave or shock of will or something like that, but the actual term just looks like shock willy. Like, it's like Willy is the name, and that just makes me think of like the wet willies. You ever got wet willied when you were a kid? You know, someone would like lick their finger and be like, wet willy, and be like, ah, why? Why would you do that? So I just imagine Law is just like, awakening power of the op fruit, the strongest devil fruit. Anesthesia! Wet Willy. Just like, so when he stabs Big Mom, his sword is like inside of her, and then he uses this attack, which is similar to counter shock, so he's like counter shocking her from the inside out. So she's like, Mama, Mama! And then she begins to bleed and cough up blood, and smoke and shit start coming out of her mouth. And Napoleon and Prometheus and Hera are like, Mama, what's wrong? Oh my God, you're bleeding. Mama, mama. And then before she can recover from that, Kid kind of jumps up and kind of grabs her and is just like, hey, you look like you could need some magnetism. A sign! And so he uses a sign, which is his awakening of the Jiki no Mi, the magnet fruit, which turns Big Mom essentially into a super magnet. Okay, because as soon as he activates a sign, Napoleon, who, you know, Big Mom's holding on to Napoleon, her sword, just like Kunk just hits her right on the head, just like, Mama, I'm stuck to you! And she's like, Mama, Mama, Mama! And then all of a sudden, every piece of structural material, every reinforced beam, every piece of rebar, every metal object within, like, I don't know, a 300-meter radius of her, just whoosh, just coalesces and slams into her at, like, the speed of sound, okay? And that's Kid's awakening technique, Punk Crash. There's another translation, actually the official Viz translation has it as Punk Clash, and there's another version that's Crash. I think it's Punk Crash, because L's and R's, but also just crash, like it's like a bunch of metal crashing into her. So I'm gonna go with that. But anyway, so that's the end of the chapter, as a bunch of the Beast Pirates are like running away in terror, as not only Big Mom is crushed under all this metal, but also like the entire structures, like literally they just got ripped out of their structures, so all the buildings are falling down behind them, okay? You have to understand, this is not normal. You're not dealing with the average magnetic force anymore. No, Kid has gone beyond. He is now a super magnet. super magnet 3, you know? So, okay, no, like literally, it is such a powerful magnetic force that I want you to imagine this. All of them, like, you know, you got your screws and people are using swords and guns, all that stuff fly toward her, but like, no, it's like the rebar in the ceiling, the rebar in the ceiling above that ceiling, everything, all the metal beams, all that stuff, just immediately. I did a little bit of research on super magnets just to learn about what this is about. So magnetic forces, like really powerful magnetic forces, are measured in Teslas. I don't know why they would be measured in electric cars, but okay. They're measured in Teslas. I know who Nikola Tesla was. They're measured in Teslas, okay? And to give you a baseline, you guys know an MRI, right? Like an MRI machine in a hospital, and it's like the room that you can't go in with anything metal, or you can't have an MRI if you have like metal inside of you, because it could literally like damage your organs, because it's a super magnet. It's a very powerful magnetic thing to use to get like scans of your body and your brain and everything like that, okay? So it's like a danger, do not enter when this machine is turned on, do not have any metal in this room, very, very dangerous, okay? And MRIs can generate about 0.5 to 3 Teslas. Okay, so 3 Teslas for an MRI is about the upper limit, and it's very, very dangerous even at 3. There's a super magnet that was built that's up to 20 Teslas, to give you an idea of the level of magnetism that humans can make. And I even read something somewhere that people can experiment with ones up to like 60 Teslas, which is, I don't even know how you get that high, but whatever. You wouldn't have to have any metal around you for like a mile or whatever. Anyway, but no, it's kind of like this, where like kid is like, okay, she's assigned to like 30 Teslas, and just like whoosh. And then that's not even talking about laws. I mean, I'm going to be making extra videos about this because this is really, really big, freaking awakenings for kid in law. But then we have K-Room, which is basically like Law's ability moving from outside the area. So Law's, you know, normal ability is affecting the world around him. K-Room is affecting the things inside of other people, okay? So on the micro level rather than the macro level, okay? And this makes sense given the fact what we've learned about awakenings so far from Doflamingo and Katakuri. The awakening essentially will affect the world around you in some way, okay, in a different way. So Kid, up until this point, you know, he could use repel and he could drag magnet stuff toward him, but this new ability, Assign, is he's turning other things into a super magnet, okay? And he could do this with probably anything. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be, he could walk up to a house and be like, Assign, and then the house becomes a super magnet. And then Law's is sort of inverted because his normal ability kind of affects everything around him anyway, as long as it's in his room. So it's like the invert to be like affect things on like the micro level. Like Law might be able to like just sever Big Mom's arteries, or like just disconnect all the arteries from her heart, just like that. Like maybe he might be able to do that at this point. I don't know. But I don't know, because the way they talked about it, like it takes a lot out of them, and so that might just be it. Like using Assign and K-Room might be enough to just wipe them out, and they might not be able to fight anymore. So Big Mom might be buried for a little while. Like it depends on how long that Assign lasts, because Big Mom, of course, like she has crazy powerful strength. She would be able to rip apart those steel beams like nothing, but how is she gonna rip apart a steel beam if it's like magnetically supercharged like an electromagnetic toward her, right? So she's like, damn it, damn it! You know, like, it depends on how long the magnetism lasts, because if it lasts a while, like, she's stuck like that, she won't be able to really do anything, okay? Even if she breaks the beams in half, she's like, good! Damn it! You know, like she just won't be able to move, okay? So it depends. I guess it's depending on how long, you know, Kid can keep it up with his stamina. And with Law's ability, I don't know if he's going to try something else or if it's just a one and done. It's like K-Room, anesthesia. That's all I have. And after that, he's done. But this was an insane chapter. A lot of stuff happened. We got to see the top 3 numbers. Kanjuro's still alive. Kinemon's still alive. Kiku's still alive. Giant, hot, fiery ball. Orochi's still alive, although everybody should have known that at this point. Yamato's looking for the explosives. Momonosuke's pooting a bunch of clouds. And yeah, Law and Kid awakened, I guess, as the cherry on that sundae. So yeah, that was the chapter. A lot of stuff. Let me know down below what you guys thought about this. This will be Tekking and Barry and Pumpkin signing out. Although tonight I wanted to announce this. I mean, I'm not going to be really doing much of anything. I'm just going to kind of hang out and watch some horror movies tonight. But if you're interested for this, Vampire Tekking wants to do a Let's Play of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, so I guess he's going to be playing that tonight on the channel. I don't know when he's going to start, maybe like 7, 8, you know, he'll probably let you know on Twitter. So just, you know, hang out tonight and just watch some Symphony of the Night. I mean, it is a pretty good game, to be fair, but that's more his speed. So that'll be happening. Thanks for watching the video, everybody, and have a very, very happy Halloween. Hold on. Okay, we good? All right, we're good. Freeze! Get the hell away from her, Ed. That was Jason's first words. You know, you never watch Jason Goes to Hell. Jason speaks in that movie. You'd think that's out of context, but it really isn't. It was just as weird as when it actually happens. Anyway, yeah, have a good one. Later, everybody. Do 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 do.